Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Arjun sent me a note and said, Steve, here's a story out of Canada you might want to check out. And I've heard bits and pieces of this filter down here. And so here's the interesting thing. This is from the CBC. Fake nurse pleads guilty to. What would a fake nurse plead guilty to? The rest of the headline is there, and I'll tell you in a second. But the question is, if you had to ask yourself, what would a fake nurse plead guilty to? They got caught. They're going to plead guilty to something. What is it? You might think, well, some kind of imposter thing, a fraud of some sort maybe. Did they forge some documents maybe to get the job? Well, it turns out that it's a little more serious because here they say pleads guilty to assaulting patients by IV injection. And so keep in mind that an assault is a physical harm or unwanted contact. And some people say, but Steve, these people who got the IVs consented to have the nurse give them the IVs. Well, they were only consenting because they'd been given the impression this person was qualified as a nurse to do that. That person's not a nurse. Therefore, it can be an assault. And by the way, some places define an assault as an attempted battery, and you'll hear assault and battery or just simply assault. So if I ran up and I shook my fist in your face and said, I'm going to hit you, and you honestly believed I was going to, and I could, but I didn't, that could be an assault. That could be. However, in this case, the fake nurse treated nearly 1,000 patients at medical facilities in Victoria and Vancouver. She treated nearly 1,000, and she wept in court as she pleaded guilty to assaulting victims with the weapon, and the weapon, of course, was an intravenous needle. Clutching a box of tissues as she appeared in front of a Supreme Court judge via video, she uttered the word guilty 11 times in response to a series of criminal charges ranging from impersonation and assault to using forged documents. The police relate to investigations in 3 separate jurisdictions where she managed to obtain work by combining the names of a real nurse with a resume and references spun out of lies. She's 52 years old, and according to documents filed, she cared for at least 899 patients at BC Women's Hospital in Vancouver and 56 patients at Victoria's View Royal Surgical Medical Center. She also forever changed the life of the real nurse whose name she appeared to have used some part of. The impact on her was significant, reads an agreed statement of facts. She was so concerned about actual and potential damage to her name and professional standing that she changed her surname to avoid association with this woman and her activities. The guilty plea is the latest chapter in a legal odyssey spanning decades and jurisdictions. She was previously jailed for 5 years for fraud and impersonation in Alberta and is currently serving a 7-year sentence for posing as a nurse in Ontario. The charges in BC relate to money she took in benefits from her various jobs and injections that turned into assaults in the eyes of the law because patients had not consented to be jabbed by a woman with no medical qualification whatsoever. According to the agreed upon statement of facts, her role from the Alberta charges expired back in 2020, but by that time she had already come and gone from a dental clinic where she was hired as a dental assistant. And on her way out the door, she stole 5 of the dentist's checks, forging his signature, and apparently stealing about $8,000 Canadian. And of course, this reminds us of George Costanza, who always wanted to pretend to be an architect. So she's pretended to be a nurse, a dental assistant. She was hired as full-time general duty nurse at BC Women's Hospital in 2020 after submitting a resume in the name of that other woman, providing the real nurse's actual professional registration number. In addition to claiming credentials as a certified flight nurse and registered nurse anesthetist, she also maintained the application process, so her new employer wound up unwittingly seeking references from email addresses that she controlled. Posing as a former boss, she gave herself 5 out of 5 on a range of assessment categories. One bogus reference described her key strengths as honest, loyal, and dedicated to her job and practice. Another lauded her for knowledge, saying she was very intelligent and takes charge. You know, I'm surprised you didn't say she's very creative. She gets away with a lot of stuff. Her position at BC Women's Hospital involved administering very, very serious drugs and monitoring vital signs while under anesthetic. Even as she worked that job, she moonlighted from October to November at Victoria's View Royal Surgical Center, a private medical facility specializing in day surgeries. But multiple reports about her lack of professionalism, her poor nursing skills, and her bedside manner led to her resignation from that last position. Unluckily for patients at the Women's Hospital, she was still working there. Within months, she found herself the subject of warnings about her professional conduct, but it wasn't until June of 21 that she was placed on leave after complaints from patients and staff. The agreed statement of facts says the hospital caught on to her deception and terminated her employment on the same day that she announced her resignation. She will be sentenced later this fall, perhaps in October. So the judge did ask her on the record a series of questions such as, you knew what you were doing? Yes, ma'am. And you used several documents that you knew were forged? Yes, ma'am. And that you had physical contact with patients that the law considers to be assault because the law considers they did not consent because they did not know that you were not a nurse? You're acknowledging that? Yes. So she's going to get punished, and hopefully it'll be serious, and serious enough, number one, to keep her from doing this to somebody else again, and also to perhaps discourage other people from doing this. Now, I would be remiss if I were to do this video and not mention, because other people will, and they'll say, well, hey, Steve, Frank Abagnale pretended to be a doctor and a lawyer. Remember in Catch Me If You Can, the movie? Yeah, the movie was fiction. There really is a guy by that name, but many of the stories that are in that movie were made up. And I've had people say, Steve, that's so obvious. Why do you need to tell us that? Well, anytime I mention something like this, I get people going, Steve, that guy pretended to be a lawyer and he got away with it. He pretended to be a doctor and got... No, he told those stories in a book and he got Steven Spielberg to make a movie. That's the scam. The scam wasn't that he pretended to be a doctor, that he pretended to be a lawyer. They've debunked all of that stuff. It's all been debunked. Debunked. So entire books have been written debunking his stuff. So don't say that, or if you do say it, understand that I'm not going to respond to that one anymore because I'm sick and tired of it. But I used to get that one all the time. And so there you go. But here it is, a woman who, pretending to be a nurse in Canada, actually stole the identity, in essence, of another actual nurse and was doing such a bad job that she was being sanctioned and reprimanded and all this stuff. And then when the real nurse whose credentials she was using found out about it, she changed her name to distance herself from that other person. And the authorities figured it out at that point pretty quickly, I assume, but already the damage had been done. And she treated at least 899 people, but maybe more, where she interacted with them on some level that would amount to assault. So she's pled guilty to assaulting patients, but also the impersonation and the forgeries. And this is an extremely, extremely scary thing. And I've heard stories now of people who got jobs and they make up things. And I was watching my favorite show, American Greed, the other night, and I saw a woman who claimed that she had a degree from the University of Tokyo in some exotic thing. And I forgot what the degree was supposedly in. And so when you're a hiring person and someone comes to you and says, yeah, I'm qualified for this job, I've got all this experience, and I've got a degree from the University of Tokyo. A lot of people go, well, who'd make that up? I don't know, a scammer? Maybe you should check. And so the weird part is that it's pretty well known that a lot of employers don't check references and don't check backgrounds. And so don't get me wrong, if they said provide your transcripts and a diploma, those can be faked also. And I've seen on American Greed in a separate episode where some guy had a thing on his wall saying he graduated from Oxford. And he'd never been there. They had no record of it. But nobody bothered to check that until after they lost all their money to him. And so, unfortunately, in situations like this, that is professions where people can get hurt, which is quite a few professions, by the way, they really need to check references and diplomas and so on. So here they might have found, well, hey, this person actually has this degree because she's using someone else's ID. But they may have also discovered this other person is working someplace else, and there can't be two people with the exact same name with all the exact same credentials. So one of them is pulling a fast one. So They got her. I'm not sure how much time she'll get. I have no idea. But it does sound like she's pleaded guilty to 11 different crimes. And one of them, of course, is assault on patients. So, Arjun, thanks for sending it. cbc.ca ran that. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Can we talk again about how pretty I am?